Welcome back, everyone. Playing some Baird Gideon Helm. Take a look at our opening hand. A little bit slow. We got a Gift of Estate. I think we'll be all right. We'll keep. So we're playing Baird Steward of Argive is 2 white for a 2/4 with Vigilance. Creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. So more or less a Spear of Safety, Ghostly Prison type effect for us and our planeswalkers. And for this particular deck, we are running a Gideon Tribal deck, where the goal is going to be to get Gideon into play, make him a creature, and then equip him with Helm of the Host and start making additional Gideons. We'll see how this goes. We are mono white, so it's going to be an uphill battle for us. And there is a Ramos Dragon Engine opponent, which I'm sure that we won't be able to interact with very well. So those are things that are all concerns. We just caught a Sol Ring off the top, so that makes this hand a bit better. I think we go Myriad Landscape first, since it comes in tapped, and then next turn, oh, this is tricky. So, because we kind of want to get the landfall for a Myriad Angel, and we also need to get Gift of Estates before we crack the Myriad Landscape. This is going to be tricky, but we'll make it work. Ooh, are we facing a Baral? Well, Baral should keep Ramos in check, and hopefully Jenara has got some stuff for both of them. We draw planes off the top. Lands are good. Play the planes. I guess we'll play the Sol Ring, and then play the Rings of Brighthearth. Thassa coming down for the Ramos opponent. Our opponents, by the way, we have Ramos Dragon Engine, Jenara Asura of War, and Baral Chief of Compliance. So Ramos is 6 colorless for a 4/4 flying. Whenever you cast a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Ramos for each of that spell's colors. Remove 5 +1/+1 counters from Ramos. Add 2 mana of each color to your mana pool. Activate this ability only once each turn. Ramos, usually some sort of 5-color spell craziness combo deck. Haven't seen a ton of it. It seems like the type of thing that I would expect people to play more of, but I really just haven't run into that many Ramos decks. Though the ones I have run into usually win. It's hard to interact with what Ramos does since it's mostly a lot of spells. So back to our turn, we draw a Reliquary Tower. So, man, I think I'm going to go Hyper Greedy, and I want to get the Emeria Angel down before I crack the Myriad Landscape so we can get like 1,000,000 tokens. So get the Emeria Angel down. We may get punished. If someone has artifact removal for this Rings of Brighthearth, then life is going to be bad for us. So Emeria Angel into play. Continuing on our opponents, Jenara Asura of War, green, white, blue for a 3/3 flying. Pay 2, put a +1/+1 counter on Jenara Asura of War. It's an interesting commander, and one that I've actually wanted to play for quite a long time. Just never gotten around to building it. But there's a lot of different ways you can go with it. I've seen people do Angel Tribal. Sometimes you just do like Bant Control or Bant Good stuff. Can work just as well. You can do a +1/+1 counter theme with it. So there's a lot of ways to go. We'll see what they're up to. Opponent casts a Demonic Dread targeting our Emeria Angel. Cascades into a Gaia's Blessing. They cycle some cards is really how that played out. Looks like they made a land drop out of the deal, so that's what they were probably trying to do. Mana Crypt for the Baral opponent. So Baral is the furthest ahead right now. Plays a Gilded Lotus and gets down another island. So Baral doing really well. Wayward Swordtooth for our opponent. That's actually good. So that means we don't have to worry about the Gift of Estates right away because now that Jenara is going to be ramping, they'll probably surpass us at some point on land count so that we can fire off the Gift of Estates. There's a Call to Gatewatch. Play the Reliquary Tower. Get an Emeria trigger. As long as it's not a Krosan Grip, we can actually just leave the mana up and do this all at the end step. So, that being the case, we'll send the Emeria Angel into the... oh, man. Ramos or Baral. Baral's got open mana. Let's try the Ramos. So, we hit in Ramos for 3. They're down to 35. And we will pass the turn. Unexpected results for our opponent. Shuffle your library, reveal the top card. If it's a non-land, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield and return unexpected results to its owner's hand. Let's see what they get. It's a Phyrexian Metamorph. Copying Swordtooth, probably. Rings of Brighthearth would also be an interesting copy. Copies of Gilded Lotus. Seems fine. Everyone got their mana ramp going except us. Wayward Swordtooth, it's starting to show up in some decks. It's a really good card. Green did not need more of that type of effect. Green already has the ability to ramp like crazy. Now it's on a creature that's undercosted, and it is not very difficult to get 10 permanents into play, especially in Commander. Glimmer of Genius for our opponent. So they're going to scry 2, draw 2 cards, and get 2 energy. Baral's only got 1 open mana, which seems like a good time to crack this Myriad Landscape, since it means that they can't cast something like Disallow. Still could be a Stifle or a Trick Bind, but let's pay 2, get a second Myriad Landscape trigger. So get 2 planes, get 2 landfalls, get our second Myriad Landscape trigger, and get 2 more planes. And get 2 more landfalls. Problem that we have to watch out for is if, when Baral eventually lays down that Cyclonic Rift, all of our tokens are going to get swept away. And they've already got the mana to do so. So that could happen at any point. which is disappointing. There's a future sight for the Baral, showing an island on top of their deck. Baral leaving up 5 untapped mana. I can't imagine that we're going to cast too much through all of that. Opponent going to cast their commander, Jenara coming into play. Finishing up on our opponent's Baral, by the way. Baral, Chief of Compliance, 1 in the blue. For a 1/3, instants and sorcery spells cost 1 less. Whenever a spell or ability you control counters a spell, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. Really powerful commander. If any of you have played any amount of commander, I'm sure you've run into Baral at least once. One of the least fun decks to play against, as their game plan is usually just counter everything. In my opinion, the absolute worst part on Baral is the instants and sorcery spells cost 1 less. Being that deck runs almost entirely spells, your commander is essentially mana ramp for you, and it is just really hard to deal with that advantage all game. Journey of Discovery for the Jenara opponent. Ramos is gonna Worldly Council. Domain, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of basic land types you control. Put one of those in your hand, and then the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. There's one you don't see much of. I guess it only works in 5-color decks. Haven't been running into a ton of 5-color decks recently. There's a Gideon of the Trials. I doubt that ever gets through Baral. How many lands does Jenara have? They have 6 lands. We have 7 lands. Gift of Estates, not currently active. So I think right here we try our commander, and we overtapped. And then I guess we tried this Call to Gatewatch. Well, opponent let that resolve, so we'll just grab this Ugin. Then we'll send a few tokens at Baral, start chipping away their life, and we'll send the other one at Ramos. And then we'll leave back a couple blockers. So Ramos down to 32, Baral down to 37. Thassa's going to scry one time. Bloodbraid Elf for our opponent, so looks like they're building some sort of Cascade-themed deck. Wondering what they're trying to Cascade into. Guy's Blessing doesn't seem like the thing you really want in your deck if you are doing the Cascade bit, though I guess it draws you a card. Going to Cascade into a Shardless Agent, which is going to Cascade again into a Nature's Lore. Seems good. You can't counter Cascade, can you? When you cast a spell, exile cards. You may cast it without paying its mana cost. It's cast, so I assume that means that Baral can counter any of that stuff if they want to. Though, while these creatures can be annoying, they're not the thing that you're really concerned about in a Ramos deck. So we're going to send the Bloodbraid Elf into the Baral. Sounds good to me. Baral takes another hit, goes down to 34. Baral gets a Mana Crypt trigger, loses the flip, nice, goes down to 31. Ugh, showing a Merchant Scroll on top of their deck. That Merchant Scroll probably almost certainly going to find a Cyclonic Rift. Opponent now casting said Merchant Scroll off the top of their library. Yep, reveals a Cyclonic Rift. So they have Cyclonic Rift in hand. Wonderful. Hopefully Ramos has some counter spells. Gonna cast a Fabricate. Jenara, usually you can expect a little bit more removal out of Jenara. Being in Bant, they have pretty good removal. I would love to find our Hour of Revelation. If we could catch that off the top for some reason, then we could force the attack against Baral, have them Cyclonic Rift, and then Hour of Revelation, and get rid of all their stuff. Ooh, gets a Primal Amulet with the Fabricate. So right now, Baral's got all of the card advantage and sitting on a Cyclonic Rift. Whatever the worst possible time to get rifted is, I'm sure that's when it's going to happen. Gavany Township for our opponent, and they now have City's Blessing. Going to play a Sakura Tribe Scout. No attacks from our opponent. That's the trouble right here. So if no one just attacks the Baral, then they just Cyclonic Rift at the end step before it comes back to their turn, and then we're all in a very bad spot. There's a land for us. Lands are good. With the Rings of Brighthearth out, we can get 2 lands out of the deal. Too little land count, 7. We could Gift of Estates, but what's going to happen is we're going to get Cyclonic Rifted, and then we'll have to discard down to hand size, and that'll all be bad news. How much mana does Baral have? 8. Plus the cost reduction, yeah, they could potentially have Cyclonic Rift and a counterspell. That's all bad news. So I think in that case, we play the Windswept Heath, use Amaria's ability, go to combat, send everything at the Baral, force the Cyclonic Rift. Ooh, opponent just going to take it? Wow, opponent just takes the damage and goes to 23. Ooh, didn't expect that. We have a Reliquary Tower in play, which means we can actually use the Gift of Estates. Crap, because we played the Windswept Heath, we're tied with our opponent now. So, nope, can't use the Gift of Estates, but we can crack the Windswept Heath, get a Rings trigger, pay for the Rings trigger, get a Plains, get a Landfall, get another Plains, and get another Landfall. Well, we have a lot of mana, but the question is, what can we actually resolve? I think we'll start by trying this Gideon of the Trials. Not too worried about any of the creatures on board right now, so I think we just lay down one of these emblems. Well, we could Rings of Brighthearth and get 2 emblems. That's pretty funny. Never thought of that. And we will pass the turn, unfortunately leaving up 6 unused mana, which never feels great. But now we're playing the Baral game where, by Tumnus Blast, opponent's going to shoot our commander. It's kind of annoying. Much rather prefer they would have shot that Baral. Gets a Chromatic Lantern out of the deal. Thassa's going to scry. Luckily, we still have a couple tokens back on defense. Opponent going to send their Bloodbraid Elf also into the Baral, so everyone's slowly chipping away at this Baral. Opponent gonna cast their Ramos, see if Baral is in. Ooh, Baral lets it go? I mean, Ramos almost certainly wants you to counter it. Opponent's gonna play a Witchmaw Nephilim. Whenever you cast a spell, put 2 counters on it. Whenever it attacks, gains trample until end of turn if its power is 10 or greater. I guess at some point he's just gonna bounce everything back with the Cyclonic Rift, but... Yep, here it comes. Does Jenara... Nope, Jenara does not have a counter spell. Super frustrating. And now that opponent has Archaeomancer on top of their deck, they can basically just do all of that again. And it's going to be really tough for... Ooh, so Ramos had to discard down to hand size. Baral loses another mana crypt flip, goes to 17. So even though they may have control of the board, their life total's starting to dwindle down. If the game goes long enough, they could lose their own mana crypt, but I assume that they would win probably before that happened. Thirst for knowledge for the Baral. Pieces of the puzzle. We probably can't resolve it, but something like Hour of Revelation would be amazing. Opponent's gonna Mystical Tutor, see what magical cards they dredge up next. Probably the win condition. Gets a High Tide, so the game's probably about to end. Opponent flips the Primal Amulet, shows a Mystical Confluence on top of their deck. Taps out, plays a Peregrine Drake, gonna untap 5 lands, wonderful. Plays an Archaeomancer, gets back the Mystical Tutor, cycles the Mystical Confluence, bounces the Peregrine Drake, replays the Peregrine Drake. Let me guess, they go infinite. Turnabout, opponent's gonna make more mana. Mystical Tutor again. There's a Palinchron. We're going to scoop it up right here because time is a precious thing and we don't need to sit here and watch our opponent play for the next 20 minutes. So this is one of the problems I have with mono white. You can build the best mono white deck you want, you will never be able to compete with what that Baral is doing. Because even if we had something to remove any of their stuff, it's still just going to get countered. And then the fact with Mystical Tutor and Personal Tutor, Baral can just search for the thing that they need the most is just ridiculous. White can't draw cards that way, it can't fight through the counters, and it can't tutor in the way that blue can. And so, in a game like this, you just have no chance. And the thing is, we got off to a good start. We ramped really well. We had a turn 1 Sol Ring. We started getting busy with the Rings of Brighthearth, and still, it doesn't matter. So, yep, there's a Blue Sun Zenith for X37.